In today's video, we're going to be doing an in-depth analysis on some of the strategies used by the best sprinters in the world to be able to win at the Diamond League final, to getting more in-depth into what they were doing within their sprinting mechanics, as well as some of the parts of the races where they put a little bit more focus on in order for them to be able to win. So we'll go ahead and hop right into it here. So we're going to start off with the 100 meter for men, just because it was a bit of a surprising finish. We have some very high level sprinters here. Really, the favorite going in was probably Christian Coleman, but Fred Curley. But the winner ended up actually being Ackeem Blake. And we'll go into some of the things that he did really well within the race. Usually what we see with the start is that Christian Coleman is able to get a good amount of separation out of the blocks and able to create some space within himself and the rest of the field. But in this particular race, Ackeem Blake did a really good job of being able to stay with Christian Coleman, and the field got out really strongly. When we look at the numbers, though, I mean, Coleman still was able to beat him to like the first 50 meters. He got a 5.59 in the first 50, 6.45 for 60, where Ackeem Blake got 5.60 in the first 50 and then 6.46 in the 60. So he's still a little bit behind at the 60, but that's where he started to be able to catch Christian Coleman. And just another race, another time that we see that Christian Coleman can work on his ability to maintain that top end speed. We can see again that they're all pretty even at this place. Again, within that first 10, we do see some athletes that are a little bit more out in front of others. But when we're looking at the numbers, what stands out to me is the finish. We see obviously Ackeem Blake got 9.93 and Coleman 10 seconds and Curley 10.01. But when you looked further into it, that 0.87, 0.91, 0.87, that was a big part of the race. Really, these last 20 meters are pretty even here. Coleman's starting to get a little bit behind, 200ths of a second, but then he loses by 300ths of a second in the 90. Once he can start to be able to finish with a little bit stronger at the end, it's going to really help him in being able to win some of these big races. And so what Ackeem Blake did really well, it looked like, is he just got pretty wide with his left leg, right? He did a good job of getting good range. Obviously, he got a good response to the gun, but that left leg looks like it's staying nice and wide as he's accelerating, as he's getting into his top speed, and then just got really smooth. You can see he's out in front, Fred Curley. I mean, he's out in front of basically everybody other than Christian Coleman. But just to be in the area that Christian Coleman's at the beginning ends up being definitely a victory when it comes to running the 100 meter, puts you in a good place to be able to win. And Ackeem Blake just does a good job with getting full range here. We just see a lot of the things that we see with the top athletes where it comes to quick foot contact time, not spending a lot of time on the ground, very symmetrical with the front side mechanics. We want to make sure we're getting plenty of extension in the knee, we're getting the toe up, but still pulling back to land with the foot underneath. It was a great executed race by Ackeem Blake from top to bottom and ended up getting the victory. 9.93 for the Diamond League champion. This actually makes it so now he's a automatic bid too for the World Championships next year. So it's a big thing to be able to win the Diamond League. Congrats to him. And now we'll go to the women's 100 meter. So another surprise finish here, not necessarily because Julien Alfred won, but because Sha'Carri Richardson ended up running 11.23, came in second to last place. Everybody was looking at really her, Sha'Carri Richardson, Julien Alfred, and Dina Asher-Smith to all be within the top three. It was just a question of which order would they kind of be in. But the fact that Sha'Carri Richardson ended up almost coming in last place was, again, definitely a surprise. We'll go into some of the things that really stood out here. And the first thing is just a great start by Julien Alfred. One of the things that stands out with her from the last two races, we have the race here in Brussels, 10.88. And then also the race in Zurich, where she also ran 10.88. She came in second place in that race. And in this race, she ended up winning. And she definitely had some improvements within the start. So again, looking at this race, she ran a 2:01 in the first 10 meters, where in Zurich, she ran a 2:04. Asher-Smith, 198. Much better start for Dina Asher-Smith, 2 seconds here. Richardson again, 2:05. And we kind of saw that as she was getting out. Big step out to the side. This is a common thing that we see with her, though, where she takes that big step out to the side. I think a little too excessive here. Wants to be able to get that foot through a little bit better. Stronger push off, I would say. And we're talking about Sha'Carri Richardson here. She's not getting a great push off, right, within that foot. And that makes it so she's getting that foot higher up instead of really pushing forward and through, getting a good knee drive, getting the toe up. And that makes it so now the timing ends up being off. She doesn't get a good step there. When you end up not getting a good step out of those first 3 steps, now your hips end up falling back behind. And a lot of times you end up feeling like you have to adjust in some way to be able to compensate for a poor start. And so this makes it look like she at least is popping up a little bit earlier and ends up just not running a great race, right? Didn't execute really well. She knows she's a little bit behind in this position. And to me, she just got out of her drive phase really early, was never really able to get into her top speed, which is what ends up impacting the final of the race. Now, if we look at Julien Alfred, it's kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. Just executed really well, got that first step down, drives that other foot through. She's still a little bit behind Dina Asher-Smith in terms of the foot contact time. Dina Asher-Smith at 2 seconds and Julien Alfred at 2:01, and just did a great job of staying consistent with her drive phase. I think Dina Asher-Smith also did a better job of staying in her drive phase and looked a lot better as well. So I think both of them looked good. I think Dina Asher-Smith still ended up getting out of her drive phase a little bit sooner than Julien Alfred, and is also just running a little bit lower. Like, Julien Alfred does a good job of being able to get up into her top speed, and from that position, or like a very tall position at her top speed, and just transitions into it really well. She's just very, very good at being able to get through that drive phase into that top end speed and able to get those hips through right away, so she doesn't lose any speed. In fact, she's able to gain speed more effectively, where it still looks like Dina Asher-Smith is going to be able to work on that and improve on that. The good thing is that there's still room for improvement for Dina Asher-Smith. It's very obvious that she's going to be able to continue to run faster. I think she did a good job of trying to stay with that drive phase for longer. She just transitioned out a little bit too early within her lower body. Upper body wise, she stayed very patient. She did a good job. But within the lower half, she wants to just be able to stay with that a little bit longer to make it so she can get into her top speed. But either way, she still ran better in that second half part of the race. We could see 9.6, 9.6, 9.7, 9.8, where in Zurich, she was running 9.6, 9.5, 9.7, 1 second, and then 1 second. So where this time she ran 9.7, 9.8, 9.9. So that's really a big improvement there. The more she could put that together, do a better job with that top end speed and being able to hold that top speed, then she's going to be able to just run better races. And really part of that ends up being getting into a higher top speed. So we can see with Julien Alfred was able to hold 9.5 for about 30 meters. So Dina Asher-Smith was able to get to 9.5, 9.6, 9.5 in Zurich, but I would say the conditions were a little bit better there than they were in Brussels. Brussels was a lot more rainy. The ability to get to the top speed didn't seem as good. And so the fact she was running 9.6 here is actually probably even a better sign. But more importantly, just the fact that she didn't fall off is a really good sign. And then we look at, again, Julien Alfred. I mean, this is why she's the Olympic champion. Just does a great job being able to get into that top speed, hold that top speed, great extension. We've talked about her ability to run really fast in the past. And the next one we're going to be looking at is going to be Kenny Bednarek winning the 200 meter against Letsile Tebogo. Definitely was a bit of an upset. Letsile Tebogo hasn't been beat since the Olympics and actually beat Kenny Bednarek a couple times. So it's definitely a surprise that Bednarek was able to win. But the big thing that he was able to do really well is just beat him in that first 100. I mean, they raced a couple weeks ago, and we could see that Tebogo ran at 10.3 in the first 100, and then Kenny Bednarek ran at 10.2, where this week he ran a 10.23, Bednarek ran a 10.23, and then Letsile Tebogo ran a 10.30, but we could see different outcomes here. I mean, this one, Kenny Bednarek just barely lost, right? 1957 compared to 1955, so it was definitely a close one where we could see 67 compared to 19.8, and when we watch him run, I mean, it didn't seem like it was that big of a difference when you watch him kind of finish here. But you could definitely see that Letsile Tebogo was starting to pick up some ground, was starting to be able to close on him. And then it was just Kenny Bednarek was able to hold for a little bit longer. We've seen a lot of the things that he's done. We've done breakdowns on Kenny Bednarek in the past. And, I mean, he's just very, very smooth and efficient. That's what he is able to rely on. And he's really good out of the start. I mean, I think that one of the things that we can get more in-depth into, and the reason I started off with the video here, was because he is just consistently really good through the start. You can see he keeps that chest down there. Definitely is focusing a little bit more on the reach, I would say. Maybe even keeping the chest down a little bit too much through there. I mean, he did have the best first 100. We talked about Letsile before, where he has a good start. It struggles, it seems like, a little bit more on the drive phase. If he can get more clean in that drive phase, that's definitely going to help him out a lot when it comes to being able to get closer to like the 19 times. If he wants to get down to Usain Bolt's record, he's going to obviously have to work on that continual acceleration. So he's getting that first 10, 20 meters, but he's not great at continuing to accelerate, which is one of his flaws, right? So he's winning by 300ths of a second here. By the time they get to 40 meters, then Kenny Bednarek is winning by 300ths of a second. So he ended up losing that lead pretty quickly. And again, I think a lot of that just has to do with the drive phase. Kenny Bednarek does a really good job of staying patient through his drive phase, continuing to accelerate. Again, we saw that he was winning off the curve. He was at a 10.23 and then just did a really good job being able to finish. I would say one of the things that stands out is Courtney Lindsay is a little bit excessive with all the movement he has as he's going through into his top speed. Like we can see with Kenny Bednarek, he's very locked in. Letsile Tebogo, both of them are not moving a ton in the middle part of their spine. They're doing a good job of keeping everything pretty locked in, pretty stable. Where we can see Courtney Lindsay here is doing a lot of excessive movement. Fred Curley just didn't look great. And there's no races, I would say, this whole season where Fred Curley looked great, where it was like, man, this is the old Fred Curley that we have been waiting for. So hopefully he's able to rebound about a little bit this season. I don't know if he's been dealing with some injuries or anything like that, but definitely a disappointing season for him. Ended up running a 2021. Courtney Lindsay also ran a 2021. So it seems like the times are a little bit slower during this Diamond League final in comparison to a couple of weeks ago. I know the weather hasn't been great there, but still very impressive. 1967 and the Diamond League champion, which means that he automatically qualifies for the World Championships next year. And the last one we're going to do is Cindy Mclaughlin-Levrone. She ran a 49.11 in the 400 meter, which is actually better than the women's Diamond League final, where the winner ran a 49.45. And so really impressive that Cindy was able to do this. And that first 100, she ran 11.8. In the first 200, 23.3. Where in the 400 meter women's final, it was 12.08 and 23.5 for the first 200. And I think this is significant just to be able to really shine light on the fact of the importance of that first 200 meter and being able to get out strong, get out fast. And they even made a comment about how strong she got out in the first 150, was able to really catch up and make up on the stagger pretty quickly. This is not only just because she runs the hurdles typically, but I think that is a better strategy in general, is to get into a stronger top speed, especially in that first 100. I see just a lot of people, if you're wondering how to run the 400 meter better, then I see a lot of people make the mistake of not running a great first 100. And that ends up, I think, being the biggest issue with the finish. Is if you don't get to a very good top speed, if you don't accelerate well at the beginning, then that really makes it so it's a lot harder to finish. At the end, regardless, you're going to run slower. You're not going to run the fastest 100 between the 300 and the 400. That's going to be the slowest no matter what. But if you can get into a faster first 100, first 200, now you could hopefully, the idea is to be able to get in better shape and be able to train your body to make it so then you could finish stronger at the end. And that's what Cindy McLaughlin does a great job of here. Again, ran 23.5 in the first 200, which is moving. That's a solid 200 meter time in general. And then was able to close out, ended up running a 49.11. So ran a little bit over 25 seconds in the second 200. And so it's important to be able to understand that strategy there. You can see a ton of length within her stride. It's just really strong, not only within the lower body, but also the upper body in each one of these steps. I think she does such a great job of being able to get a strong push off there, has plenty of range within her legs, right? Does a great job with the knee bend. I think that an important thing to be able to consider here when you're watching yourself run is as the foot is striking the ground, I think it's important to be in maximum knee bend in that other leg. So I'll see a lot of people that will be stuck in like a 90-degree angle here, or maybe even like a 45, right? The lower that foot is, then the worse it is when it comes to the ability to be able to maximize the step, because now you could really try to hold that foot high and then be able to get plenty of range in each one of the steps. Once you start to not get very much height with the foot back behind, not getting a good push off, now you end up having to work a lot harder in the front side, and that makes it so you're not nearly as efficient within your steps. The better you could do being able to push off the ground as your foot is toeing off, then you're going to be able to cover more ground horizontally. And again, that's one of the things that we see out of all the best sprinters. A great job being able to push off and cover ground horizontally and not wasting a lot of time in trying to either cycle the legs fast and not get very much distance, or getting too vertical and not covering enough ground going horizontally. So things to be able to consider when it comes to your running. I think most importantly, especially when running the 400, you got to think about efficiency. The more efficient you can be, the better you're going to be able to run, and also make sure you're getting out well within that first 100 and first 200. I would say depending on what level you are, the struggle would be maybe like a 5-second difference, right? If you ran the first 200 in 23.3, but then ran the second 200 in 28.3, let's say, then that would mean that you got to really work on your ability to maintain top speed. But I think a lot of people, especially within the 400, have to focus more on the first 200. So if the times are not that big of a difference, then you're just not getting to your top speed as effectively. So you got to work on on your top speed and improve that first 200, and that should be the focus to make it so then you can improve your overall race. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. If you like the video, click that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We have a couple other great videos for you to be able to see here. We'll have Sydney McLaughlin as well as a breakdown on Julien Alfred, get a little bit more in depth into both of their sprinting mechanics and ways that you can improve your own speed. Talk to you soon.